Day 12 of the Diddy trial, and this morning we saw critical state witness Dionte Nash hold up fairly well to cross-examination and have only just a short redirect before we heard from Mia, which is the pseudonym for a personal assistant who described the tyranny of working directly under Diddy. I am Joe Neerman, aka Good Logic. I am a New York litigator who's practiced in this very courthouse, and I'm here every day to break down the legal perspective as to how this trial is unfolding. Now, yesterday we heard from Dionte Nash, who is a celebrity stylist and met Cassie in 2007, and they became very close friends and remain so to this very day. He says he loves her as a friend and that he would go out with her all the time and saw the interactions on a day-by-day basis. And as I described, his testimony was somewhat unique in that not only did he bear witness to the physical, psychological, and emotional abuse that he claims to have watched Diddy unload on Cassie during their on and off tumultuous 11-year relationship, but that he was aware of the freak-offs and was able to testify to the fact that she did not want to participate in many of those freak-offs and that she would reluctantly go, saying she didn't want to go. Yesterday, he told us about how on her 29th birthday, she's out partying with her friends, and Diddy showed up, and he wasn't going to tell Diddy no, even though Diddy said, "Do you think I should come?" He's like, "I was not going to tell that man that he could not throw his girlfriend a party." But he didn't think it was a good idea, and sure enough, when Diddy showed up, he demanded that she leaves her party and go with him to a hotel so that they can have a freak-off. He told of several instances like that. He spoke of the physical abuse, how he saw Diddy throw her down and that she hit her head on a bed frame and got scarred from it. He told of Cassie looking to self-delete in frustration when Diddy would follow her and she's trying to run away from him, and he would follow her wherever she was. And he was particularly powerful in two respects. Number one is that the state and the defense, the key element that they're arguing about here, what this trial ultimately can come down to is, was Cassie a willing participant or not? And Cassie herself, when she testified, could seem conflicted at times. Some of her testimony seems like she's saying, I didn't want to do it. And other times she's shown text messages where she's implying that she was okay with it. And she claimed that she had to tell him that in order to keep him happy, in order to keep from facing further abuse or to deal with his potential blackmail, where he was threatening to expose her, and the financial control that he had over her life, where he would just throw her out of the house sometimes and tell her she'd be left with nothing. And all of this was nicely confirmed by the testimony of Dionte Nash. And what he brings in here is that he was aware of the freak-offs when they were happening, saw her leaving, packing her duffel bag, her black duffel bag with toys to go to these freak-offs, and claims that she said no, she didn't want to go, but she felt she had no choice, or as Cassie said, at that point it was her job. So while the jury may question the testimony of Cassie, or question her memory, because there's a lot of drug use that's been attested to by virtually everyone who came in here, question whether she actually recalls her own state of mind as to whether or not she had a free choice to go there, the state now has given us a witness who stood up very well to cross-examination, where Donaldson, for the defense, struggled to really get him to refute or recant or look in any way like his testimony was shaken throughout the 3-hour cross-examination that he went through. So, and the other part that makes him particularly damning is his credibility is likely improved by the fact that Dionte Nash on the stand, even though he said, "I absolutely do not want to be here," seems to really feel comfortable in that witness chair. He made several jokes. Every hour there'd be a couple of comments he would make, which would have the viewing room we were watching from laughing. He's a very likable person, and likable people tend to be found to be very credible. So in that regard, Dionte Nash could end up being the turning point for the state in getting convictions for RICO or the trafficking of Cassie. Now, I want to get to the next session, the second half of the morning, which is when we had Mia take the stand. And Mia's testimony, in stark contrast to Dionte Nash, is far more stilted, far more drawn out. You won't see this in the transcript, but when she's talking, especially when she talks about things that seem to be affecting her emotionally, she seems to be continually searching for words in ways that juries will often find to strain credibility. Now, I am not passing judgment on her as she describes the tyranny of working for Diddy. On day one, the very first day she ever worked for Diddy, she had to go for 24 hours straight before he would release her and let her go. She showed up at 10 o'clock in the morning and was working well through the night and into the next afternoon. And that she basically was run ragged by him, where he supposedly needed 4 to 5 personal assistants, and she spent a year as his sole personal assistant, where she had to make sure he was attending to all his needs, handle his all aspects of his social media, serve as his liaison to Hollywood, and predict what needs he would have, and could only go home when Diddy excused her. She described one time she was working for 5 days straight, 5 straight days with no sleep, until she was left hallucinating and seeing things blurry, and broke down crying. And she said, I didn't even know why I was crying. I just started crying until Diddy finally said, all right, go home and go to sleep. So all of this leads into the tyranny of Diddy as a boss. And she made reference to the fact that she was sexually abused by Diddy. We have not yet heard about that. And it's possible that for one reason or another, that her testimony is stilted. Maybe it's because of Diddy. We don't know, but maybe it's got nothing to do with Diddy. But the problem that I think the state may have with her testimony is that ultimately it's very long, it's very drawn out. I felt like I was sitting there for 5 days. It was very slowly coming out. And they're trying to build a foundation, and it could be that there's some things that are compelling. And in certain ways, she's been helpful in corroborating the stories that were told over by Dionte Nash, the stories that were told over by Cassie Ventura. In that sense, she has been helpful. And yet in other ways, I'll tell you one thing that I expect the cross-examination to be hitting on, which is an infamous incident with a bed frame that her version seems to be somewhat different from Dionte Nash, specifically with how the injury that Cassie ended up sustaining, which led to a scar, occurred. What do I mean by that? Dionte Nash told us yesterday, and seemed to corroborate what Cassie had said, that while he was pushed, that he pushed Cassie, and that she fell and hit her head on the corner of her bed frame, and she ended up sustaining a scar over her left eyebrow, or in the middle of her left eyebrow, which required plastic surgery. When we had now Mia, who again, that's a pseudonym, that's not her real name, when she was testifying, she said that Cassie took her head and slammed her head down into that bed frame. Those are two very different actions. And I expect, and we should anticipate, that on cross-examination, the defense is going to hit on the fact that it does not look the same when someone is thrown down and hits their head on a bed frame versus what Mia was stating, which is that he held her head over the bed frame and slammed it down into the bed frame. I very much expect that the defense is going to go deep into this to try and establish that it was not Diddy's fault that her head fell and that she hit the frame. Now, the story that Deontay told was much more consistent with that Cassie told, that he threw her and that she ended up hitting the bed frame. So we'll see how this ends up holding up on cross. She does not seem to have the same level of confidence that Deontay had. And I expect the cross to be somewhat aggressive, and that Brian Steele is supposed to be doing the cross-examination. We'll see how that goes. That should come this afternoon, but we have not yet finished the direct testimony from Mia. She has more to give us with respect to her own personal sexual abuse that she claims Diddy gave her. And we'll see how well her credibility holds up. But I want to point out one more thing before I urge you to like, share, subscribe if you want more of this content, and you should. Please do that now. But the thing I want to point out to you is this. All of Mia's testimony here so far, I'm looking at other journalists and I'm asking them, how is this implying, when we're talking specifically about the tyranny, and we got an hour and a half to 2 hours, it's just for the longest time, her talking about how hard it was. working day after day with him, and how aggressive and relentless, and how she couldn't sleep or she couldn't go anywhere unless he excused her. This all shows him to be a terrible person, terrible boss at the very least, a tyrannical boss. But it's difficult to see how this plays in to a charge for sex trafficking or for RICO. And I'm frankly a little surprised that the judge allowed so much of this to come in, because it does seem highly prejudicial. It's likely to make the jury dislike Diddy for reasons that seem to have little relationship, that I can tell, to charges for RICO or charges of trafficking under 18 U.S.C. 1591. So, but it is out there. We did get that. We got an extensive detail about his being a tyrannical boss. And we're now starting to get to some of the abuse that she saw that she witnessed Cassie sustain. She did say that she's very close friends with Cassie to this day. She was there with Cassie and Deontay when that bed frame incident happened. She went with Cassie. She also talked about how she went with Cassie to a Prince party, and this corroborates a story that Cassie had told us, how Diddy wanted them to stay in a hotel, and they decided to sneak off and go to a Prince party, and sure enough, Diddy was there. And we just heard right before the break how Diddy got violent with Cassie, and the next day he suspended Mia from her employment, and she got a notification that she was unsuspended for insubordination. That's what I got for you this morning. I'm breaking down much more of this for you later this afternoon. I urge you, please like, share, subscribe, and hit that bell if you want more notifications from your lawyer inside the Diddy courtroom. Till later, Godspeed.